Thank you.
I think, didn't Barb say she wasn't gonna be here?
Maybe, I don't remember.
She had said that she was gonna miss one.
Okay. I know there are a couple of people said they couldn't come on November the 2nd. You said you couldn't.
Oh, is that what it was? I don't know.
So there's no class next week. So don't, I mean, you can come, but maybe you can go to the other class.
Right.
But I won't be here next week.
Okay. It
I'll
still ends
be-
at the same time on the 30th?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll be in Toronto.
Oh, have fun.
Thank you.
It's October 26th or something?
Correct.
We're doing 6 no class, but
All right, so we're moving forward in time tonight, and we're going to move away from the Chumash type of things, the stories that are in the first 5 books, and we're going to move to some of the books that were composed later, so the last few books. And specifically, during the first part of class, we're going to look at the book of Proverbs. We're going to look at Mishlei, and we're going to look a little bit at Kohelet, and we're also going to take a look at the poem that people say on Friday nights to their wives. We're going to look at Eshet Chayil and see what Eshet Chayil has to say. So basically, what I want to do is I want to comb through parts of the book of Proverbs and parts of the book of Kohelet or Ecclesiastes and see what they tell us in terms of what they tell us in terms of family life. And so I've already highlighted the verses. We're not going to do all those verses because some of them are redundant. We don't have to do all of them, but we will do some of them and see what we get to. So I put up on the board between mom and dad and between parents and children. So when we come to a verse, what we have to decide is we're putting together a manual based upon the book of Proverbs, a manual related to family life and how mom and dad should treat each other and how parents should treat their children and children should treat their parents. And then we'll just write down on the board. And so by the time we're finished this, we'll have a little manual of the book of Proverbs. So first of all, there are 3 books in the Tanakh that are known as wisdom literature. The 3 books are Kohelet or Ecclesiastes, Proverbs or Mishlei, and Iyov or Job. They are totally different in content to anything else in the Torah. There were questions about some of them actually as to whether or not they should have been included in the Tanakh. The rabbis in the late Second Temple period were discussing whether these books should be included or not. And part of the reason is that in the rest of the Tanakh, in most of the rest of the Tanakh, there's a triangle, and it's God, land, and people. So it's the land of Israel and the people of Israel. And for the rest of the Tanakh, there are interplays between these 3. God's relationship to the land, God's relation to the people's relation to the land, people's relation to God. That's what it's all about. Beginning almost with the very beginning of Bereshit, all the way through most of the Tanakh through the Proverbs. These 3 books have none of that. They don't include any of this stuff. They don't relate to this stuff. They don't talk about the people of Israel or the land of Israel. And they don't talk about God much, except for the fact that they say that wisdom comes from God. So these books are basically all about common sense. These books are a series of statements and short stories and parables about how one should lead one's life. It's kind of like a Jewish version of the Poor Richard's Almanac, except that some of them are a little bit more elaborate than that. And it doesn't necessarily have a specific order. It's not indexed like most of the Torah is not indexed. And so it rambles a little bit back and forth and back about all these different things. But the assumption is, if you want to lead a good life, you have to know how to behave. And there are certain basic rules about how one ought to behave. And this book and Kohelet describe those things about how one ought to behave. There are things in here that are very famous. There's a lot of things in here that are not quite so famous. They cover a wide range of issues, but they have nothing to do with Shabbat or kashrut or sacrifices or anything like that. It's all about how one ought to relate to their fellow beings and how one ought to relate to their lives and how they ought to lead things. This is a genre of literature that was not unique to the Jews. This is a genre of literature that they find in other cultures throughout the Mideast. So, for instance, there was a series of books, of wisdom literature books, that were put out in Egypt centuries earlier than the composition of this, and some of the stuff appears to have been lifted directly out of the Egyptian book and stuck into our book. So there is definitely cultural borrowing and exploitation from one place to another. Okay, questions? Yeah.
Pirkei Avot, why is that not considered wisdom literature? Because it's part of the Talmud, or is that?
So Pirkei Avot is much later. So this stuff was probably composed sometime during the Second Temple period. Most people believe that it's a compilation. So it's an anthology of wisdom literature rather than having been done by one person. So Second Temple period, Pirkei Avot was compiled 200 CE. So Mishlei is probably about a good 500 years earlier than Pirkei Avot. Some similarities, although in Pirkei Avot the emphasis is strongly on that triangle I just told you about. So what do you have to do in order to be a good Jew? You have to study Torah, okay? Or you have to believe in God, or you have to. It's a different orientation. Totally.
Yeah, so this is definitely in that Torah, it's another book.
Yeah.
Is it?
So it is a manual for living your life with lots of statements about how one ought to behave.
Is
And
it
what-
just for the Jewish people, or is it for everybody?
It doesn't say Jews in here. God is mentioned periodically, and God is mostly mentioned in terms of not that you have to worship God, but wisdom comes from God. So wisdom is a gift from God, and if you live your life with wisdom, then life will be good. Okay. Do you know who tradition says wrote the book of Proverbs? Pardon? So according to tradition, King Solomon wrote 3 books. When he was young, he wrote Song of Songs, which is a love song. And when he was a mature adult, he wrote Proverbs. And when he was a crotchety old man, he wrote Kohelet, or the book of Ecclesiastes. So that's according to tradition. Did he really write it? Probably not, but that's the tradition that we have.
Very polar when you think of.
Pardon?
Very polar when you think of like the Song of Songs,
Yeah.
and then you think of.
Ecclesiastes, yeah. Very, very different.
Looking back at his life.
All right, so let's just start. And just to give you a quick taste of Mishlei, just turn to the beginning of it. In this book, it's on page 1599. Otherwise, if you don't have the book, it's just beginning of Mishlei.
15?
1599. If we have time, by the way, we will spend a little bit of time looking at the life of King David as a father, but we'll see. We'll see how much time we have. Anyway, so it starts out, first verse, and it says, "The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel." So that's the introduction. So that just repeats what I just told you, that Solomon wrote it. Why is that verse there? If you're going to be a somewhat cynical, critical, modern scholar, why is that verse there?
So you know who wrote it.
You know who, what, or?
I'm gonna listen to what they say.
Okay, listen, it's an important book, right? So King Solomon, also because they want to give the book credibility. So if somebody said this was the book of Joe Schmo, and what would have happened to it? It would have just gone by the boards. But by saying that this is a book of Proverbs that was written by King Solomon, already he has more credibility, and all the more reason why the rabbis included. I'm certainly not suggesting that it shouldn't have been included in the Tanakh, Not
Not
even
just
included.
Solomon, he's Solomon and he's the son of David, and
Right.
so it's like generational important.
That's right. So, so it says, for learning wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of discernment, for acquiring the discipline of success, righteousness, justice, and equity, for endowing the simple with shrewdness, the young with knowledge and foresight. The wise man hearing them will gain more wisdom. The discerning man will learn to be adroit, for understanding prophet and epigram, the word of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and discipline. My son, heed the discipline of your father. Do not forsake the instruction of your mother, for they are graceful wreath upon your head, a necklace upon your throat. So we're learning that ultimately, if you want to lead a meaningful life, you have to have wisdom. You have to be smart. I'm not smart, but you have to know how to behave.
Last week when we were dissecting the Parsha a little bit, the whole idea of don't forsake the instruction of your mother, and it goes back to what you said last week, when we take guidance from our mothers,
Mhm.
but more of the discipline of our fathers. When you made comment about that.
I made a comment at the beginning about what one does naturally with one's parents. Okay, so what's the very first thing we have here in terms of our understanding for putting our manual? What's the first rule here?
Well, be wise, behave.
Okay, I'm sorry. So verses 8 and 9.
advice.
Verse 8, what's the
Well-
first thing?
That sons should listen to their parents.
Yeah.
Right. It says, hear the instruction of your father.
Listen
Oh,
to
mine
your
says
dad. And what do you do to your mom?
Don't forget it. Don't
But-
leave it
right,
by the
and then-
wayside.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Don't discount what your mother teaches you.
Right, okay, so listen to your dad and don't discount your mom.
Hopefully they're saying the same things.
Right. Hopefully they're consistent. Okay, so what we've got here is the importance of passing on what? Passing on knowledge.
knowledge.
So your mom has wisdom, your dad has wisdom, and so the emphasis here in terms of our parenting manual here is passing on wisdom. Okay, turn to chapter 4, verse 1. Okay, and let's read chapter 4, verse 1 through verse 9. Deborah, you want to read?
Sons, heed the discipline of a father. Listen and learn discernment.
Okay.
For I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my teaching. Once I was a son to my father, the tender darling of my mother. He instructed me and said to me, let your mind hold on to my words. Keep my commandments and you will live. Acquire wisdom, acquire discernment. Do not forget and do not swerve from my words. Do not forsake her and she will guard you. Love her and she will protect you. The beginning of wisdom is acquire wisdom. With all your acquisitions, acquire discernment. Hug her to you and she will exalt you.
What's he hugging?
Wisdom.
Wisdom, not mom.
Yeah.
She will bring you honor if you embrace her. She will adorn your head with a graceful wreath, crown you with a glorious diadem.
Okay, so do we have anything additional to put in so far?
Well, keep commandments, that's
And
pretty
she
different.
will
Give you all the
love
stuff.
you back. She'll
So wisdom.
help you, she'll put you.
Okay. So I think here that there's, but still listen to your mom, don't discount listen to your dad, don't discount your mom, between acquire.
I mean, it doesn't say you should only acquire wisdom from your parents. It just says acquire wisdom.
Right, no, I'm putting in here, I'm only giving you the verses that are our mother, father, but yeah, you
Oh.
should acquire wisdom in general. And there's also another thing in here that I think is important, it's not just between mom and dad, but we'll see it again in a little bit. It's generational, it's not good English, passing of
Oh, yeah. 'cause he said
information. So what
that
is it
my
here?
father had told me this.
Right, so
Right.
there's, you'll see it in another place as well. So it's not just a matter that you should listen to your mom and dad, but know that your mom and dad learned it from your grandparent. So it's interesting, we have an important grandparent thing here too. So the grandparent is part of the family. and the grandparent also passes information, so it's passing on from generation to generation. Okay, turn to...
And it's not just acquiring wisdom to be wise, but for what it will do to you and enrich your life.
Right, yeah. So, and that's what I tried to say at the beginning. So acquiring wisdom is not just pouring information to your head. Acquiring wisdom is knowing how to run your life. I guess in terms of modern psychology, they talk about two kinds of intelligence. So they talk about cognitive intelligence, which is what IQ tests measure, but there's also emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is knowing how to get your way through the world. So the wisdom here is really both of those. Okay, turn to, you're going to see we're going to skip a little bit.
You get a lot further sometimes.
Turn to chapter 23, verse 22.
Yeah. 22, listen to your father.
Okay, Fran, you want to read?
Listen to your father who begot you. Do not disdain your mother when she is old. Buy truth and never sell it, and wisdom, discipline, and understanding. The father of a righteous man will exalt. He who begets a wise son will rejoice in him. Your father and mother will rejoice. She who bore you will exalt.
Okay, stop. We're going to get into harlots after that, and that's not part of the topic today. So
Come on.
we'll stop right there. So the first part of it is listen to your dad and don't discount your mom and acquire wisdom. But what's the second part adding in? There's a new piece here too.
Discipline.
Truth.
Parents.
And there'll be shepping nachas if you
Yeah,
do it right.
that's
Right,
right.
right,
Okay. So the parents shep nachas from what?
From having children who do the right things
Right,
and live
from wise.
wisely.
Right, and who
From
don't,
wise
who
children.
don't, ridicule their parents when they get old.
Oh, you know what? I'm doing this the wrong way. I'm sorry. This is between
Parents
Oh,
and
parents and
kids.
kids.
parents
Yeah.
and kids.
It's interesting that the instruction vis-a-vis father is always in the positive. I mean, not always, but the two cases we've had, listen to your father, do not disdain your mother.
Mm-hmm. So we can go back to what we said last week, which was that parents are that the children are more likely to be afraid of their dad and less likely to diss their dad, but they may be more likely to diss their moms. They're telling not to do it. So that's one explanation. Another explanation is that I told you we're putting a manual together, but this is biblical poetry, and biblical poetry has certain rules to it. Generally speaking, you can tell biblical poetry because each line is composed of two parts, and the first part complements the second part. So either what it does is the first part says the second part in the same in different words, or sometimes it says the opposite of the first part, or sometimes it amplifies the first part. So what the author here is doing is trying to say the same thing using slightly different language. But if we want to get midrashic about it, we can probably do that. All right, so we've got this other part here, parents shep nachas from their children. So listen to your kids, or kids listen to your parents, and if you do listen to your parents, then you're going to shep nachas. Have things changed a whole lot in the past 3,000 years? Not a whole lot. Okay, anything else in this piece? You can see on verse 27, it says, "A harlot is a deep pit, a forbidden woman is a narrow well." There's a whole piece about here about staying away from bad women. This is, I have to tell you, by the way, this is clearly written. Most of it is clearly written by a man, and a lot of this is written from a male perspective. It's not written from a female perspective.
I
So
can't let go of the buy truth and never sell it. I think that that's a huge piece in there.
okay, so tell me.
So I just think that it's sort of like what the relationship of wisdom stands on.
Mhm.
You know, you can have all of that knowledge, you can have everything, you can honor me and you can honor your mother, but I just think that it jumps out where it says buy truth and never sell it. It's like the pedestal.
Right. Yeah. So truth, justice, and the Jewish way is the
You
is the
remind me,
strong
because
thing.
I I can't figure out where we are, but that's fine.
We're
Me.
at 1639.
39, okay. That's where I thought I was. Okay.
Verse 22.
Well, okay.
And by the way, what else does it say in verse 22? Another thing that we didn't mark down. Second half of 22.
Do not disdain your mother when she is old.
Yeah.
It's adding something else to it.
Right. Yeah, it's like don't ridicule, when your parents get elderly
Has to go in right there.
and they can't necessarily take care of themselves.
That's right. So take care of your old parents. Take care of your elderly parents, because they can't take care of themselves. I told you last time that the rabbis were very strong that honor your mother and father has nothing to do with little kids honoring their parents. It has
Right.
everything to do with honoring your elderly parents.
Right,
and
taking care of them in their old age and burying them properly and.
Mhm. Okay, let's try another one. Chapter 22, verse 26.
22. 6.
That's mine.
What is it?
Chapter
Is that the one
22.
Not
that's...
be those who give their hand.
Yeah.
What is it?
I can't.
Do not be one of those who give their
Oh, that's not right.
22:6?
No.
That's what I was-
22:26?
No, I got 22.6, but that's
You
not
had
right.
22:25. Lest you
Yeah,
learn
22.
his ways and find yourself inside.
22.26. I'm sorry, 22. No, that's what I said before, right?
No, that's 23. Wait,
Yeah.
22. No.
Okay, 22.6. That's what it is. Okay, 22.6.
Oh, good.
Okay.
All right. Oh, this is one we know.
Okay, so what does it say? Lisa, you want to read?
Train a lad in the way he ought to go. He will not swerve from it even in old age.
All right, so this is moving things a little bit. So earlier we talked about children have to listen to their parents, but what is this saying an obligation of parents is?
To make sure you teach them that.
Yeah, right. So,
Right, put them on the right path. Right.
and when does education start?
A lad when he's young.
When does it start?
Yeah,
When they're born.
When they're young.
The lad.
that's right.
Yeah.
So it says, train a child the way you ought to go, do not swerve even in old age. So you train the lad, you train the child, right? So education begins in the young years. Okay, move to...
Hopefully he doesn't fall off the derrick.
Right. Okay, speaking about falling off the derrick, turn to chapter... You already know what off the derrick means? Off the derrick, okay. Turn to chapter 13.
Yeah.
What was that?
13, verse 24.
13:24.
Thin.
Barbara, you want to read? You're a preschool teacher, it's good for you.
Yeah. He who spares the rod hates his son,
Lost.
but he who loves him disciplines him early.
All right. So what do we learn now?
Beat it into him. Not necessarily a good thing.
Beat your...
You have to have the courage to discipline them.
Beat your children well. It's a whole new
Whole new
song.
Discipline starts early. So
Okay.
I can't get away from this in terms of explaining it. Otherwise, I guess I could, but Mishlei is pretty straight on saying that corporal punishment is
Okay.
okay and corporal punishment is appropriate. Spare the rod, spoil the child. So corporal punishment is okay, and also that you start disciplining early. So I think I told you last week I had this family I'm working with the father who just, I don't want to discipline my kid, I just want him to do whatever he wants to do. So we've learned here that discipline, if you're going to discipline, you have to discipline from the time the kids are little. But we've also got this beat your kid thing.
But it's not only doing it early, it's a sign of love, to be sure.
Mm-hmm. And why do you say that it's a sign of love?
Because if you let a kid just do anything thinking you're being loving, it's going to be ruinous as they get older.
That's right.
I mean, I'm not in favor of the beating part.
Right. No, and you're right. I mean, a parent who loves their child needs to set limits.
Right.
Children need limits, and you have to set limits. And if you don't, you're not expressing your love appropriately.
Well,
But
that's-
here it's talking about the beating part. Just by the way, I saw another family this week. It was the first time I saw them. And I'll tell you the end first, and I'll tell you the middle. So the end was I did an intake with the family. I saw them for about an hour, and then after I was finished seeing them, they told me I sent them off to talk to the billing secretary, and then about 2 or 3 minutes later, the father came back to me and came into my office and he says, "I really have to tell you something." And I said, "Well, okay, what do you have to tell me?" He says, "I want you to know how nice it is that we're working with a practicing Jewish person." I wasn't quite sure what that meant. So,
Are they Jewish?
pardon?
Are they Jewish?
No.
Do you wear your
Interesting.
kippah when you're?
Yeah, I always wear kippah.
So
So, I mean, they knew I was Jewish, but I've never had
Right.
anybody quite say
Right.
that to me before. So I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, it's nice that you have a certain spirituality about you."
Oh.
But it's a little bit more explanatory because when I was talking to them, they said that they had belonged to a fundamental church, and they have a child who they believe has ADHD, very distractible, short attention span, always on the go, trouble staying within those limits that you're talking about. So the people in the church had told them that they should beat the child.
well, because he's got the devil in him.
Right, or got whatever, but
Right.
it was a fundamentalist. Excuse me, it was a fundamental church, and just like fundamental people of all kinds, this is what it says.
Right.
You know, in the Yiddish it's geschrieben, so if it's written, you do it, and it says you beat your child. So they left the church, which was a good thing. But that was that came out of my discussion with them.
Right. I mean, beating your child, yeah, you know, it's like not necessarily a good thing to do, but on the other hand, you know, so many people are into how a child, you know, that we always have to say that you're, you know, doing such a good job, even when they're not. And, you know, if you're not honest, you know, with the child and helping him along, he's not going to, you've got to somehow discipline him.
No, you don't do you don't give children undeserved praise.
Yeah,
You praise them according to what they've done.
right. And, it's,
And like you said, there has to be discipline, but discipline within
right,
limits.
they'll have great self-esteem, but they'll be idiots.
They don't have good self-esteem, that's the
Well,
problem.
They don't.
No, but the parents think that they will.
Yeah, and the kids realize after a while, the kids realize that they're not that the praise is not real praise. Kids want to be praised for what they've actually done and
Children
accomplished.
realize it,
Yeah, right. That's the very best drawing I've ever seen. That's the greatest shofar.
especially when they've come to the table and gone like this,
Right.
Yeah.
and they can get outside.
Right.
And they know that it's not. It's interesting, but
Okay, try 23:13.
You know, if we do this in an order.
I'm doing it by.
I know.
23. 13.
Okay.
Wait, just don't leave me because I'm like,
Okay, whose turn is it to read? You want to read?
I don't,
Oh, it's page
Yeah, which way we-
1638.
Page 1638.
you didn't have me for your Hebrew
I'm
teacher.
good.
That's the problem.
that's true.
Ask David, he could do
I'm
it.
sure you can do anything.
1638,
16.
verse 13.
Do not withhold.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So read it. You want to read it?
Sure. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you beat him with a rod, he will not die. Beat him with a rod, and you will save him from the grave.
Okay, so
Ah,
what is that adding to what we just read?
If you beat him with a rod, it's
We'll
So-
save him from awful fates.
right.
So beat your kid.
with a stick.
It won't kill him.
I don't know.
It could.
So what's he saying? If you use corporal punishment, it's not so bad. He's not going to die from it, and not only is he not going to die from it, but he's going to benefit from it down the line. Why do you keep shaking your
I
head?
don't like it, because I'm having a lot of trouble with this.
Right.
All right.
It could, hitting somebody with a stick and kill them.
All right, so,
Wrong.
so the fact that you don't like it, what is that?
I think it's horrible child raising things. You can't beat your students. You shouldn't be beating your kids. There's a lot of ways to deal with things without beating them or hitting them or any.
Okay, so how do
Coming
we,
from a non-parent, I guess maybe I'm a little unbiased, or a little biased, but
I'm a
whatever.
parent. I agree.
so here, everybody agree? Nobody likes it?
Well,
You like it?
you can beat something into them, as opposed to like, you could keep telling them to do such and such but physically hitting them with a stick, probably they're not going to be listening so well.
Is
All
the
right.
word here-
But the
word
whole
here is literal
context
on the
of
Hebrew
this
side
is
too. It's
different.
literally beat 'em.
Yeah, okay, let's do one more verse, then we'll continue the conversation. So
Okay.
turn to chapter 29.
Let's see, beat him with the rod.
So you're moving
29.
right direction, Marley. Chapter 29, verse 17.
29. I did it.
17.
Discipline your son. Is that it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll read that when it's my turn. Discipline your son, and he will give you peace. He will gratify you with dainties. So what does that mean? Is that if you discipline your son's going to appreciate it, and eventually he will say thank you. He will say
I
thank you.
got one of those.
Pardon?
Really, because I said mine gave me a lot of problems growing up. And he's now saying he shouldn't have done the things that he did.
But you didn't beat them with a stick.
No, but after a while, you just kind of let them do what they want to do. Right?
So children will appreciate
They come back around.
Right.
discipline.
Right, they'll, and guidance and things like that, but
They have good bones.
it doesn't have to necessarily,
Be corporal punishment.
yeah.
So they'll appreciate it eventually, but they may not appreciate it in the
And it
moment.
may be once they have a teenager.
And that's the parents.
That's the other thing, because it's starting with that.
I think that even goes back a little bit to the generational thing, the door-by-door kind of thing, because here we'll sit here and say, we didn't like being disciplined, and we fought it, or we were rebellious, but then you turn around and have children, and you say, yes, we're going to train them, and we're going to do it, but you can see the progression, up there where it said that it's generational. My mom did it, and my grandma did it, and your grandma did it, and we pass on, maybe not beating with the rod, but certainly setting parameters.
No, you
for the
see
family.
styles within families that go from generation to generation. But let's go back to the other thing, because I think it's really important to discuss that for a couple minutes. So what happens if you read a verse in the Tanakh that you violently disagree with? They say, I can't accept that verse. So,
Legislate it out of existence.
All right.
You usually find a commentary
They
that'll,
understood within the context. I mean, they didn't know from child psychology.
right.
And I would imagine kids were probably more obedient. They weren't kids as long as they are now. I mean, they were already, I would imagine, working. or
Yeah, by
doing
12 years of
something.
age, they were already working.
So they were kind of sooner adults in a way.
and as we learned last week, a girl could get married at 3 years old. So you only had a very short time with them.
All right. So one explanation is take the verse in terms of the historical context in the time that it was written. So understand what people were like then, that was then, this is now. So that's one way of explaining it and coming to terms with it. So it's not an eternal verse, and it just reflects a specific time. How else might you deal with it?
Say it doesn't work for me, and it's not applicable, and disregard it.
So then another way of doing it is to say that the Torah the book of Proverbs is just the work of a human being, and that particular human being had his point of view, and I got my point of view, and he's entitled to his point of view, I'm entitled to my point of view, and that's okay too.
What's
That
the
works
bigger
for
lesson?
Proverbs, that doesn't work for Torah though.
Well,
Theoretically.
but remember, Proverbs is supposed to be
Right.
at least divinely inspired, if not divinely
Okay.
written. So the other way that you do it, and it happens a lot, is that you reinterpret the verse.
All right.
Okay. So what you do is you say the verse was never meant to be taken literally. It was meant to be understood metaphorically. So let me give you I think we talked briefly about this last week. So in the book of Devarim, it says that if you have a rebellious son, not only are you supposed to beat him, but what are you supposed to do? You're
Take
supposed
him to
to
the center of the square
and
and have
stone
him
him.
let the
And mom and
elders
dad
stone
have to
him.
stone him first, and then
Yeah.
all the townspeople stone him
So
as well.
there-
So how do you deal with that? So it becomes understood in a different fashion. So in the rabbinical writings, one tack is, it was never meant to be literal, it was just meant to scare the children into submission. But it was never done. The rabbis actually state that never in the history of the Jewish, I don't know how they knew this, but they say never in the history of the Jewish people was a child ever stoned. It was just there for people to study, but it was never something that was enacted. So you can take this same verse that says spare the rod and spoil the child and say, well, not a real rod, but
Right.
harsh words or discipline or strictness, or using today's terminology, time out, or
Yeah, see,
you know,
that's,
whatever
that's,
happens.
It's like the boogeyman, don't go there, the boogeyman's gonna get you.
Right.
right, I mean,
Yeah, so
when I
really
look
is
at
no
this,
good.
I say, okay, they may have done this in the past, but we now know that that's very damaging to physically beat your child, and so, you know, and you do discipline them, and you might say, I'm gonna kill you, but you don't actually do it.
Right.
And when you distill it to what it's really trying to teach is, discipline is important.
Right.
You know, however you want to do it, this is how they did it then, we don't like it, but the essence, like that nucleus.
Right, so the basic message is important. The basic
Right.
message
Right.
that one has to discipline.
And so pare back what we don't like to just get to that part, and
Right.
that's timeless.
Yeah, did I tell you about the verse from Noah last week? The nature of children, did I tell you that?
No.
So, in the Torah reading of last week, after they get out of the ark, God says to Noah, or God says to himself, I guess, he says, I'm never going to destroy human beings, all human beings again. And it says, Ki yetzer lev ha'adam ra minu rav, which basically means that the inclination of human beings is bad or evil from their youth. So it doesn't say that people are bad. It doesn't say that that human beings are bad. It says that their inclination is bad. So in terms of our understanding of modern psychology today, that means that, I mean, you work with little kids. If you leave 2-year-olds to their own devices, what are they going to do?
Whatever they
They're
want.
gonna eat those cookies
right.
from the cookie
They're going to
jar.
do whatever they want
Right.
to do, and they're going to screw up royally, and they're going to get into all kinds of trouble, because little kids are, to mix my metaphors, are very id-driven, and they're driven by their desires and their wants and their needs, and they'll do whatever they need to do. So what is our job as parents and adults to do?
Set boundaries.
Our job is to discipline them and to teach them that they can't do whatever they want. So God is saying He created human beings who, left to their own devices, are going to do all kind of bad things. And when He created the world to start out with, He only gave Adam and Eve one rule, 2 rules. One rule was be fruitful and multiply, which they did a decent job with. But then the other rule was don't eat from the fruit, and they screwed up on that
Right.
like
On the
within 10
first
minutes
day.
on the first day. And so then when after the flood and he started over again, He gave him more rules, hoping that with more rules it would be okay. And then at Mount Sinai, what happened was God realized that the 7 rules wasn't enough. So what did He do? He gave him 613 rules. So human beings need to have those rules, need to have that discipline in order to progress. All right, let's try another one, see if it gets any better. 1520.
Do you see in your practice that parents are giving less rules, less discipline?
No, I have a selected practice, right? I have parents who tend not to give enough rules to their kids, but that's,
I'm saying less.
yeah.
They're not.
I don't know if it's less now than it was before, but I certainly have parents who are afraid to give rules to their kids. Okay, 1520.
A wise son makes his father happy, a fool of a man humiliates his mother. Folly is joy to one devoid of sense.
Okay, we can stop there.
Okay.
Okay. So a wise man makes his father happy, which we talked about before. But if you have a foolish son, what happens?
Mother's humiliated.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
So
What's the
parents
opposite
have
of-
nachas from wise children, and are
Humiliated by.
humiliated. What's a fool, by the way?
What's a what? A fool?
In this
Somebody-
context, what's a foolish child?
One that just disobeys.
Who doesn't know any better?
So a foolish child is a child who doesn't have wisdom. So a fool, a wise person is a person who knows what to do and how to behave, and a fool is somebody who doesn't know how to behave. So a person who has not acquired wisdom. All right, we haven't talked about this much yet, so turn to 17:6.
All right, that's easy.
Fran, you want to read 17:6?
Grandchildren are the crown of their elders, and the glory of children is their parents.
So what is this saying here? Good kids are the glory to their parents, but what else is it adding in here?
Grandchildren,
Their grandparents.
grandparents.
So we're
Okay.
generation again.
So, grandparents are involved. So I think it's fascinating that, this is the second place in the text now where we've seen mentions of grandparents. So we usually think about the nuclear family, we just think about the moms and dads and the kids. But they're also saying that grandparents shep nafas from their
Right.
grandchildren. I think it's interesting too in terms of, we know that how short the lifespan was at that point in time, but even though the lifespan was short, there were still grandparents around, and grandparents were still involved. I don't know what's going to come of it, but I was talking to Judy Lobel, who runs the Fed Ed program, and she talked to me about running a program for new grandparents.
Oh.
So grandparents who were brand new to that role.
What are they going to do with
Pardon?
us? What are they going to do with us?
Yeah. How can one or how should one deal with their adult children?
Right.
What happens if you disagree with something, with the way that your own children are raising their children? How do you handle that? Also in terms of Jewishness. So let's say you have let's say your child is not involved at all Jewishly and you feel it's really important. What can you do in terms of inculcating your children with more of a Jewish sense? Or what happens if your child has married somebody who isn't Jewish, and then you've got you've got an intermarried family, and you as the grandparent still think that being Jewish is really important. So what do you do? How do you handle that?
Teach me.
Would you like to share?
Well, actually, my daughter has she married somebody who's Jewish from Brooklyn area or whatever, and they got together in Chicago, and they're doing fine. My son married somebody from Chile, and she's not Jewish, but they do share religions, kind of, which, like if it's a holiday, they go to people's houses, but they haven't, I don't know if they'll join a shul or not, but he talks about his daughter having a bat mitzvah, so, you never know.
Mm-hmm.
To me, what we're talking about is watching everybody's parents, I have them share, they do it together as a family. And if I want to say something, maybe I don't, I don't know how everybody else works.
How much are you allowed to say?
Yeah, right. So at this point,
How much you're allowed to say? How much should you say?
Right.
What should you be doing?
Right.
And
you don't, honestly, you never know which way to do it, so.
My son and daughter-in-law have never said anything to me, but my guess is that they think that every time I come to visit, I'm evaluating the two grandchildren and checking out their development.
Oh, golly.
Which in a way I am, but I can't help it.
Do you ever say anything to him?
Pardon?
Do you ever say?
I try not to say anything. So the older one, he's 4.5 now, is doing very well academically, and the mother just said, he was born in January, so he was born 3 weeks after the deadline for getting into kindergarten, And so
That's what I teach.
so the mother decided to keep him back a year, and I was a little bit concerned that by holding him back a year he might be bored and that wouldn't be a good thing for him. So then I did say something, but I tried to couch it in possibilities, and I said, okay, put him into the class, but if you see he's starting to have behavior problems, and if you see that he's bored, and if he's not really excited about school, then maybe you ought to consider moving him up a grade. But I try hard not to tell them what they have to do. They won't listen anyways. So. Okay. But the text is saying that the grandkids are important to grandparents. All right, let's move. We're moving out of the first column and into the second column, chapter 19, verse 13. Okay, Fran, I think it's your turn.
A stupid son is a calamity to his father. The nagging of a wife is like the endless dripping of water. Wow. Yeah? Yeah.
All right, so we talked about stupid sons, we've talked about foolish sons already. I mean, that's already,
Right.
but I'm
They
going to
never
write
put
this down
daughter
only,
in there.
only because it's here.
Yeah.
Well, because there's only
This.
sons. Yeah. A son means children in
Right.
our case.
So nagging wives are a bother.
Our torture.
Endless dripping of water.
Yeah, it's like it's like being waterboarded.
Okay. Like I told you at the beginning, this is largely written by a man. Okay, try the next one. 25, 24. I don't even have Sid here to join me.
Dwelling in the corner of the roof is
25,
better than a
24.
contentious woman in a spacious
Is
house.
that what you said?
Okay, yeah. It's page 1643, the last line. Dwelling in the corner of a roof is better than a contentious woman in a spacious house.
Some of these are pretty funny. Like a sign in your wall, you know.
This man must not have chosen well when he married.
So nagging wives are torturous.
Oh, wait a second. If it's written by Solomon, he had lots of wives.
Right.
Hundreds.
That's true.
And then he kept getting more of them.
He spent a whole lot of time with them, so I know.
Yeah, he had hundreds and hundreds of wives.
Right, so he knows all the types of wives.
Okay. So I'm definitely talking about a nagging spouse way back when. Try number 518.
How many days? 25.
Okay, Lisa, do you want to read?
Chapter 5, verse 18.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Let your fountain, that's right, let your fountain be blessed, find joy in the wife of your youth.
Yeah.
Oh, he likes the younger ones.
Okay, so
wait.
read through a couple of verses.
1607.
A loving doe, a graceful mountain goat, let her breast satisfy you at all times, be infatuated with love of her always.
Okay, then we get into forbidden women. We don't want those. Okay, so in an ideal world, when do you get married?
When you're young.
When you're young.
Yeah, okay. So you have young marriage, and what about this young marriage? Is it good? Is it not good? Is it nagging?
This
Joy.
one's good.
Be infatuated, that's all good
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Right.
He
When you're
loves,
young, it's great.
So
obviously, the ones who were not
Older,
as nice
nagging
were-
wives, and
yeah.
pretentious.
right, so
what
this
I
kind
got.
of counters the other one.
Right.
So this
Yeah.
talks about the wife who you don't get along with, but this says
Infatuation.
you can definitely, infatuation, good positive relationships, kind of a romantic statement. And then look at 1822. Barbara, you want to read?
He who finds a wife has found happiness and has won the favor of the Lord.
Okay. So marriage is a good thing.
Somebody else's wife.
And then let's just do one more. Do 1914.
Oh, interesting. Where are we? 1914. Is it property?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Property and riches are bequeathed by fathers, but an efficient wife comes from the Lord.
Okay.
Define efficient word, what's the Hebrew word?
The Hebrew is Ba'it v'hon nachalat avod u'me'adonai isha maskelet. So seichel is
Smart.
smart, right? Yeah. So it's efficient doesn't mean necessarily that she gets things done quickly. It means a woman with wisdom. Okay. So so where does a good marriage come from, or where does a good wife come from?
God.
Right.
Yeah.
My grandma used to always use that word, seichel.
Right, right.
So a good wife comes.
And it sounds like he should have probably stopped acquiring wives after he was young, because he liked it when he was young, and as he got older, it seems he got these nagging and and his whole life like just went right downhill.
Right. So it's a little bit balanced, right? So he does talk about women who are nagging, but he also talks about good, solid marriages, believing solid marriages come from God. Did I tell you the story about Rabbi Meir and the disagreement he got into with the Roman matron? It's a famous midrash. I remember Yossi, I'm sorry. If I told you to stop me, because I forget from week to week what I say. So Rabbi Yossi, the Talmud says Rabbi Yossi was having a conversation with a Roman matron, and frequently she was asking questions about religion and Jewish practice, and so she said to him, well, what does God do what does God do now? He created the world and he finished creating the world, so what does he do with all his time? And Rabbi Yossi says, well, he makes shidduchs. That's what he spends his time doing. So the matron said, that's not such a big to do. I mean, shidduchs aren't so hard to do. And so she said, I'll show you. So she took 1,000 male slaves and she took 1,000 female slaves, and she figured out which slaves should go with which slaves and then she married, and she had them all get married. So she had 1,000 marriages that she performed, and then within a couple of weeks they were all at each other's throats, and it was terrible, and it was awful, and it was really, really bad. And so the matron went back to Rabbi Yossi and said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I did all these marriages, none of them are working out, and they all want a divorce, and they don't want to live with each other. So Rabbi Yossi said, see? So
Not so easy.
that's what keeps God doing. All right, so I could have started with chapter 1, and we could have read through the whole thing, but if I had done that, we would still be on chapter 3 right now, and we wouldn't have covered most of this. So that you can see that the stuff doesn't go in order. It goes here and there and around and about. But there are certain principles here that are coming through. So Mishlei suggests, number 1, that education is important. Number 2, that it's important to impart wisdom from generation to generation. Number 3, that wise children are the glory of their parents and the glory of their grandparents. Number 4 is, as you've said yourselves, laissez-faire parenting is not a good idea. Just letting the parents do whatever they want to do is not a good idea. You have to have discipline. We may disagree with the form of discipline here, but discipline is important, and also saying that someday your children will thank you for the discipline that you provided when you were and your child. So you're getting a sense of what they're talking about in terms of parenting. I don't believe it's a whole lot different than what we talk about today. I mean, it's basically the same thing. And then as far as marriage goes, taking care of older parents, taking care of parents when they're elderly, continues to be an issue. And then good marriages and not good marriages. And the nagging stuff is almost like the substance of cartoons that you would read. I mean, not so much now, but you would read about the nagging wife. There's even in some Haggadot, if I remember, I'll bring it. There's a play on words in the Haggadah, and some of the illustrated Haggadot have pictures of nagging wives. like from 400, 500 years ago.
How is it really?
I don't remember the pun. I don't remember the pun anymore. I have to look it up. But I just remember that there were these pictures. Okay, so now we're going to move from Mishle, and from Mishle we're going to move to Kohelet. And Kohelet is very, very different. So Kohelet, or Ecclesiastes, as I told you, was somebody who was supposedly written when Solomon was an old man, and he was a crotchety old man. It is a book. I guess it's the words that come to mind is it's a dystopian view of life. It's a surprising book that came in here, that came into the Bible, because it counters the idea that everything is going to be good in the end and that you get rewards for doing good things. And it doesn't say that. Basically, Kohelet is all about no matter what you do, we all die in the end. And no matter how much money you accumulate, somebody else is going to get it after we die. And we all end up in dust, and there's nothing new under the sun. And everything is just, there's no reason to work because we all die in the end. I mean, it's a very depressing. It's a depressing book. However, a part of what he does, part of his message is that since everything is meaningless, and all of our efforts end up with nothingness, then what we should do is make the best of our situation, is basically what he says. He says, be happy, have a good bottle of wine, have a loaf of bread, make the best of your life, enjoy your life, because this is where you are, and you might as well enjoy it. Part of the reason why Kohelet was included in the Tanakh was because the rabbis realized it was an attempt of people to say, well, good things don't always happen to good people, and bad things don't always happen to bad people. And so this was his understanding of it. It was very brave of the compilers of the Tanakh to include this book in, which runs counter to all the other stuff that we read, that if you listen to the words of God, you'll be rewarded. And that doesn't necessarily happen. So why was it included? Oh, I left something out, but I'll come back to it. Why was it included? Because if you go, what page is Kohelet on?
1765.
Okay, 1765. It was a good year. So if you go to the end of Kohelet, look at the first verse of Kohelet. It says, the words of Kohelet, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Same question, why does it say that? Because it justifies its inclusion. But then go to the very last verse of Kohelet.
Always futile.
And
What page is that?
17,
Okay.
again? No.
it says,
Where are you? I'm sorry.
1784.
actually verse 13, the sum of the matter, you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Sum of the matter, when all is said and done, revere God and observe his commandments, for this applies to all mankind, that God will call every creature to account for everything known, be it good or bad. So the very last verse says, in spite of everything I said, and everything that I've said in the previous 12 chapters, keep the commandments because God is going to call everybody to account. So what probably happened is that there were people who wanted to include this book in the Bible, and so what did they do? They added the verse on at the end, because the verse at the end says, ties it together, but it goes back to good things happen to good people because God's in charge of everything. All right, so let's look at a couple of verses. There are not a lot here in terms of family. There's a couple of things on women and one on children. So turn to chapter 6, verse 3.
Books, she's going to go through them.
1772.
Thank you. Where are we?
At the very bottom.
1773,
Right
on the
up.
left-hand side,
6:3.
verse 6,
Okay.
No, verse 3.
or verse 3. I'm sorry.
No, you know what? I don't like that one. Go to 725.
7 what?
725. Okay, this is more on women in terms of what he has to say. Okay, I put my mind, got it? I put my mind?
I don't have it.
Okay,
Hold on.
What is it?
1776,
Middle.
right in the middle.
Okay.
I put my mind to studying, exploring, and seeking wisdom. So he also is a seeker of wisdom. And the reason for things, and to studying wickedness, stupidity, madness, and folly. So what did he spend all his time doing? Studying the world, and studying human nature, and studying what was going on, and trying to make sense of things. Now I find woman more bitter than death. She is all traps, her hands are fetters, and her heart is snares. He who is pleasing to God escapes her, and he who is displeasing
Let's
is
go back to that young girl.
caught by her. So you can see that he's a pretty bitter old guy. He's probably had a lot of bad relationships along the line, and his relationship with women has not been too terrific. Let's try another.
You have like over like 75 wives. I mean, how much is your relationship really with any single one?
Okay, so find
No, if you beat your kid, maybe his relationship with his wife is not so spectacular either.
find chapter 9, verse 9. Okay, so this counters it.
That's nice.
He says, enjoy happiness with a woman you love, all the fleeting days of life that have been granted to you under the sun, all your fleeting days. For that alone is what you can get out of life and out of the means you acquire under the sun. So this is the counter of the first verse.
Right.
First one, it says, women are all full of snares, and this one is saying, you got to live, you got to get the most out of life, and so what are you going to do? Enjoy your
This
relationship.
guy is bipolar.
Enjoy your relationship with a woman. Okay, the last one I want to show you from this book is not really about men and women, although it often is described that way. So turn to chapter 4, verse 9. This is sometimes used in marriage ceremonies. Somebody want to read?
Two are better off than one in that they have greater benefit from their earnings. For shall they fall, one can raise the other. But woe betide him who is alone and falls with no companion to raise him. Further, when two lie together, they are warm. But how can he who is alone get warm? Also, if one attacks, two can stand up to him. A threefold cord is not readily broken.
Okay. You're having trouble with that, huh?
What can I say?
You do it enough, you get used to it. If I'm going too fast, I'm sorry. Okay, so
You have to
two.
make sure that I have it before you move on.
Okay, two are better than one.
What's interesting, did women work back then? I mean, earn money?
I'm so glad you asked me that question, because we're going to look at it in just a second.
Yes, they did.
Especially the wife of a king?
Women,
Well,
women
well,
worked
the
and
little
men
power does.
studied.
Does everything.
But we're looking at King Solomon, you know?
Still doing that.
But writing to a community.
Pardon?
Well, maybe, I guess.
But these are lovely phrases here. These are lovely phrases saying the importance of companionship. But you can read it anyway. You can read it as companionship of a man and a woman. You can read it as companionship of two men. You can read it as companionship of two friends. But for all of his caustic statements that he's making throughout the book, every once in a while he comes up with these statements, but make the best of it, and it's better not to be alone. It's better to have somebody with you. All right, so this is going by quickly. We're almost done. Okay, turn back to Mishlei. We're not going to make it to King David today. Turn back to Mishlei,
Only the page.
to Proverbs, chapter 31.
Still need a page.
What verse?
Yeah.
1653-ish.
Chapter 31.
31.
1653
31
at the very
10.
bottom.
Verse 10.
Yeah.
Turn to 1654.
Oh, I should have.
31,
31,
First
10.
10.
10?
What a rare find.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on to,
Yeah.
there we go. Fine.
Okay, so this is what we're gonna do.
This one I like that.
Eshet Chayil, some of you probably don't know that Eshet Chayil comes from the book of Mishlei. It's the very end of Mishlei. And it was most people say that it was probably included to counter some of the more caustic statements that were made about women, and most of the book is written about men, what men should be doing and how men should behave and how men should be doing things. So they included this piece in about women at the end to try to balance that. So first of all, Eshet Chayil is a poem. It's a poem just like I told you before, 2 parts to each line, there's some repetition or elaboration, amplification from one line to the other. The other is that it is an alphabetic acrostic. So if you look, verse 10 is Aleph, verse 11 is Bet, verse 12 is Gimel. So it goes through the whole alphabet. So it's a structured poem using the conventions of the time. Besides the fact that it requires some skill to develop an alphabetic acrostic, why else is it important to do that?
You can remember it. So
That's right, you remember it, right. So it's good for memory. I mean, I too, when I say Eshet Chayil, it reminds me of, I go through the alphabet when I'm doing it if I don't have the book in front of me, because it helps me remember. It is recited, I think most of you know, it's recited by husbands on Friday nights to their wives. It is meant to be. It's funny. I was at my sister-in-law's a number of months ago for Friday night, and they don't have much of a Friday night thing. So I wanted to sing Eshet Chayil to my wife because we normally do that. So I started to sing it. I was like 3 lines into it, and my sister-in-law says, "No, I don't want to listen to this." So apparently she hears it all the time at funerals, and so she has it in her head as as it's tied into.
I wanted my
funeral.
husband to sing it to me, or at least recite it when we were already living in Michigan, but the kids were little.
Mhm.
No, I don't want to. And then his cousin died, and they recited Eshet Chayil at the funeral, and I said to him at the funeral, I don't want the first time that said over me when I'm dead. And he started.
Okay,
But it was kind of, it's like that shouldn't be when it is.
that's right.
I don't know if I've ever heard it at a funeral. I mean, they've
it's New
talked a
York.
little bit about, sometimes they will say that this person is a woman of valor, but I've never heard them do the whole
This was a
thing.
funeral in New York.
Oh.
I don't know that I've heard it here.
Mhm.
I was gonna say Jeff plays it on his phone on Friday nights,
Yeah.
Just like this. There you go, honey.
So it's meant to be an idealized picture of woman. But as we read through it now, I want you to look at it through the eyes of husband and wife, and what this tells us about the idealized view of family during biblical times. So we're talking right now about something that was probably written early Second Temple period time. And so in an ideal world, so this would be and if it was written today, Elisa, this may go over your head, but it would have been written to June Cleaver. Okay.
Yes.
You gotta
All right.
watch these
It's,
old
Nickelodeon.
movie channel.
Yeah.
but it's interesting because I started teaching 6th grade Hebrew school 17 years ago. And 17 years ago, in my unit on Shabbat, I taught this to our students, and they broke it down. And they talked about what it means to have a mom, that was like Ruby's, who got up in the middle of the night and prepared. And today, I would never even think to put it out
Mhm.
for sixth grade students. You
It's,
know,
it's a whole different world.
you know, so when you think about it, it's interesting.
Okay.
But you think how much those mothers are working and how busy they are.
Yeah.
But it would be meaningless.
No, so it's not saying that mothers are not capable. It's saying that
To the
the
student.
way we measure the
Yeah.
capability,
Right.
we do it in a different
Then-
fashion.
It would be
So-
interesting though how they would make comparisons then. You know, what is her clothing like? What does she do? Like
And
what
some of
would
it-
be the accompaniments?
But some of it is interesting because some of it you can still make those comparisons. So what's the relationship of the woman to her husband? What does she allow her husband to do? What does she do for the children? So it's all fascinating. So what a rare find is a capable wife. So they describe Eshet Chayil as capable. A Chayal is a soldier. So it's a little bit more than just capable. It's a strong, assertive, powerful woman. Her worth is far beyond that of Ruby's. So as I read that line, it reminds me, I just told you about June Cleaver, and June Cleaver always
And
had
the
her
pearls.
pearls on, no matter what she was doing, she had her pearls on. Her husband puts his confidence in her and lacks no good thing. So her husband is totally reliant upon her and knows that she's going to do what needs to be done. She is good to him, never bad, all the days of her life. So is that a demeaning thing, or is that a good relationship thing?
It's a good relationship thing.
Okay.
This is-
She looks for wool and flax and sets her hand to them with what else? What does she do?
So
She's good at spinning.
Yeah, she's good at spinning. She does what needs to be done. What would be the equivalent to that in today's household?
washes the clothes.
She does some groceries.
Shops for bargains?
Yeah, right. So shops for bargains. She
Clips coupons. She doesn't waste things.
right. She doesn't write things. She does what needs to be done for the house. She is like a merchant fleet bringing her food from afar. So she knows where to go to get what needs to be done, and she's aware of where things have to be got from, and she's basically taking care of her household. She rises while it is still night, so she gets up at 4 or
She gets up
5:30
and bakes
in
the
the morning.
bread and,
Right.
and packs everybody's lunches.
That's right. But you're also talking about, working women. So
Right,
what is she
right.
doing? She's doing what needs to be
Right.
done to get things done. So she's really somebody who's managing the household. The father here is not perceived at all to be managing the household, and supplies provisions for her household. So she makes sure the food's there. She does the grocery shopping. So she knits and she mends the clothing, and she gets all the bargains, and she makes sure that the larder is supplied and that everything is there that needs to be done. The daily fare of the maids, she takes care of the household help. But on top of that, she sets her mind on an estate and acquires it. She plants a vineyard by her own labors. What does she do?
She finds them a good house and plants a nice garden.
Yeah, so what does she? She buys
Yeah, she's-
property.
Yeah.
So this isn't just a
Right.
woman who is sitting and doing household stuff. It's a woman who knows how to buy and to sell, and she's buying property.
She's a good real estate investor.
Yeah, and she's buying property, and she plants a vineyard. So she knows how to get done what needs to do. She girds herself with strength and performs her task with vigor. So she's full of energy and does what needs to do. Right, as we read through this, it kind of reminds me. I know it's an old song too, but it reminds me of the song, "Woman."
Yeah.
I can do whatever I need to do in order to get things done. So I think
And
that
woman, hear me roar.
yeah, a woman hear me roar, right? I can do all these things. I don't need a man here. There's nothing here that says that the man has to help her. There's nothing here that says that the man has to be around.
Except if it's too tall and you can't reach it.
Right. She sees that her business thrives. Her lamp never goes out at night. So what's she doing at nighttime?
Keeping the book.
Yeah, she's keeping the books. She's keeping the books at night. So she's getting up while it's still dark, and she's going to bed way after it gets dark. And keep in mind that back in biblical times, your active hours were generally just the daylight hours. So this time of year, where the days are getting shorter and shorter, people, what would they do? They would go to bed early at night. because there was nothing else to do, and they didn't have a lot of lights.
She's literally burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah, right. She's working really, really hard. She sets her hand to the distaff, and her fingers work the spindle. So the distaff and the spindle are part of the loom, and she's busily creating clothes. And on top of that, she's not just looking out for herself. Who else is she looking out for? Right. She gives generally to the poor. Her hands are stretched out to the needy. She's giving tzedakah. So as much as she's working for her family, and as hard as she's working for her family, she's giving tzedakah. She's not worried for her household because of snow. For her whole household is dressed in crimson. So what does that mean?
They have warm clothes to wear.
That's right. They have warm clothes to wear.
Right.
She's not worried about the cold. She's not worried. And what about this crimson thing? You know what that's about?
Is it like a red velvet?
Yeah. So it's red velvet,
like the riches of like a royalty.
right.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So the only people who wore crimson were royalty.
Yeah.
So it's like royal blue, but crimson was similar as well. And only the royalty wore crimson because it was hard to get the dye to make the red, and so you had to be very rich to do so. So she's working very, very hard, and she's an affluent woman, and she's taking care of her family, and she's dressing the family in the best of clothing. She makes covers for herself, and her clothing is linen and purple. So not only does the family dress well, but she also dresses well. Purple also was a very, very difficult color to get. Linen was expensive. Okay, her husband is prominent in the gates as he sits among the elders of the land. So finally we got the husband, and what's the husband doing?
Sitting and talking.
He's probably studying, you know, with the
board of directors.
Yeah.
Right.
He's all those guys.
So the
He's a woman.
husband is a mucky muck in the community.
Right.
The husband is an elder in the community. In biblical times, all of the business and all of the court doings and all of the city business was all done at the gates of the city. If you wanted to find out where things were happening, you would go to the gates of the city. So when it says the father is sitting in the gates of the city, it's because, like you said, he's on the board of directors, or he's running things, or he's doing the man stuff. But who's doing the really hard manual work? Yeah, she is.
Kind of like in Fiddler on the Roof, that, you know, if he was a rich man, he could sit, you know, in the synagogue all day.
That's right.
Right.
She makes cloth and sells it and offers a girdle to the merchant. So not only does she make stuff for her own family, but what does she do? She opens up a business.
She must be working all day long.
Pardon?
All day
Right,
and
that's
all
what I
Yeah.
said, she's it's
Yeah.
up before dawn and.
She has a shop.
Right.
She has a shop, and she's selling stuff to people on the outside. It's interesting, if you look at the Hebrew, excuse me, verse 24 says, Sadina stava timkar. So a sardine in contemporary Hebrew is like a sheet. So it says she made a sheet, or she wove a sheet, and she sold it. And then it's got this phrase here, Chagor natna leknani. So the literal translation of that in terms of contemporary Hebrew is she's giving belts to the Canaanites. And whenever I'm reading it, I'm always wondering, why is she giving a belt to the Canaanite? It's like, does she have a visitor who's coming to visit her and she's giving the belt? But the Canaanite here is meant to be a merchant. So it's somebody who is not part of the
like
family.
a
It's somebody from
traveling
the
merchant.
outside, traveling merchant.
Yeah.
So she's giving something to the Canaanite. She is clothed with strength and splendor. She looks to the future cheerfully. No, definitely not the nagging woman over here. So same book, but a very, very different look. So for all her work, she's upbeat and she's working hard and everything is fine. Her mouth is full of wisdom, there's the word. So she's an intelligent lady and she knows what she needs to know. Her tongue with kindly teaching. So she's a wise woman, she's a bright woman. She oversees the activities of her household. She never eats the bread of idleness. She's always on the go, always keeps herself busy, always does the right thing. And then
Not sitting home eating bonbons and watching soap
That's
operas.
right.
I once learned that idleness was more about, for lack of a better word, gossip.
Okay, it could be. It could be. But also, the Hebrew is absolute, and a person who's at sale is a lazy person. So saying she's keeping busy, but idleness could be gossip as well. Now we've got her children coming in here. Her children love her. Her children say she's a happy lady. And then her husband praises her. So she's, they really have good things to say about her. Okay, just before we finish this off, so in terms of the way we're reading it now, is this an archaic poem which is inappropriate for this in this world of women's empowerment?
I think this is an empowered woman, that she is capable of doing everything. You know, it doesn't mean, you know, you kind of hope that, you know, in today's day and age that she's not doing it all by herself. But, you know, they're saying she has all of these different things that she can do.
She's industrious. And
Yeah,
that's
very much so.
good.
Right, and she's smart. And during this time
Kind.
to be wise and have like all this knowledge. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, she's smart and she's industrious and she's capable
And generous.
and generous.
And
I
moral.
mean, she has lots and lots of very positive characteristics that I think translate into this world as well. So we don't. I think it's a poem that travels well, and continues to have meaning. And then, okay, so then we move into verse 29, and it's interesting. In verse 29, there's a change of person. Okay, so it moves from third person into second person. So it moves from many women have done well, but you surpass them all. So it changes from talking about the generic superwoman to
you personally.
to you personally, to a particular woman. When this is sung, that this line has a special piece to it that really points out that you're talking to your wife on Friday. Okay, and then just like Kohelet ends with a move away from wisdom, so too does this move away from wisdom. And it says, grace is deceptive, beauty is illusory. It's interesting. If you read about many of the biblical women, one of the first statements you have about biblical women is that they are beautiful, right? They are beautiful to look upon. That's one of their primary characteristics. It never says here
Right.
that this woman is a beautiful woman. It never says here that physical appearance is important. It's all the other characteristics important.
It's more what she is inside,
Right,
not
more,
the
yeah.
outside beauty.
And then it ends, and then it says it right here. It says, grace is deceptive, beauty is illusory. So at a certain point, the beauty is not really what's important, but what is really important, it's her fear of the Lord that a woman is to be praised. So we're bringing God into it, and she fears the Lord, she understands God, and then extol her for the fruit of her hand, and let her works praise her in the gates. So let her reputation go before her, and let everybody know that what she's supposed to do. I hope you had a good time today.
Indeed.
And so this is what we're going to do next time. So in 2 weeks, we're going to move forward, and we're going to look at post-biblical material. So I think the easiest way for me to say it is we're going to look at family life during the time of Jesus. So what was Jewish family? What were the roles of men and women and children during that time? Oh, you're not going to be here. But it'll be taped.
2 weeks.
Next Monday, there's no morning class either then? Are we in Toronto in the morning too?
No. I'm leaving after the class in the
So
morning.
there's still class today.
It's still the morning.
Well,
I did a fun 1 year.